There's one thing I always meant to ask Jack. Back in the old days, I wanted to know about that doctor of his. The man who appears out of nowhere and saves the world, except sometimes he doesn't. All those times in history when there was no sign of him. I wanted to know why not. But I don't need to ask anymore. I know the answer now. Sometimes the doctor must look at this planet and turn away in shame.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Kevin, I'm a geek, you're watching Kevin the Geek, and today I am going to be reviewing Torchwood, Children of Earth. Now I had a comment on one of my videos not too long ago where I was asked, what was it that made you want to start a YouTube channel? How long have you been thinking about doing a YouTube? And for me, the first time I ever thought I would really like to talk about something, it was Torchwood Children of Earth. And I wouldn't necessarily say that I thought initially that I would make a YouTube in order to be able to do it, but it's something I wanted to really talk about a lot. But a lot of people I know and a lot of people who would listen to me about stuff weren't really interested in this kind of stuff. And so it was ultimately something that I couldn't really talk to anybody about. So this is the review that I've been waiting probably the longest amount of time to be able to talk about. Now, if you have not seen any of my stuff before, I do reviews, I do reactions, I do rankings. If you want to see any of it, I've got lots of different playlists on my channel, which basically show everything that I've done over this last almost year. I started making videos on the 23rd of November last year, when I started my Doctor Who review journey, which currently I'm in the middle of doing my reviews of the 4 specials, from the 2009 specials, in the last years of David Tennant being the 10th Doctor. And this is when this aired. It basically aired in between Planet of the Dead, which was that sort of Easter one for Doctor Who, and Waters of Mars. And this was a story that was aired over 5 episodes, which takes place within the story on 5 consecutive days. And I feel that the show and the BBC and everyone made the right decision to air this on consecutive nights. So it was 1 week. You watched it literally Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And that's good for 2 reasons. One, because you actually got a chance to breathe at the end of each episode. But also, it gave you just enough time to actually kind of think and digest. Because this is dark. This is by far the darkest thing that I think I have ever watched. That is a movie or a TV show or even a video game, to be fair. But it's hard to watch. Now, if you've never seen it, bearing in mind, obviously, this aired 14 years ago, so I'm wary about giving you a spoiler warning, but just in case you haven't ever seen this, I would highly recommend it. Even if you've never watched any of the other episodes of Torchwood, I would highly recommend you watch this. It basically tells a story of every single child on planet Earth on a random day stopping wherever they are and not doing anything. And they sort of regain control and they go about their days. Then it happens again. Then they start talking in unison, saying, "We are coming." And then the next day, "We are coming back." And then finally, "We are coming tomorrow." And this story does a great job in building and building and building. Now, it does have its missteps along the way. The second episode is a bit of a dud one, and a lot of people do feel that that second episode could pretty much all be entirely skipped out. But the show deals with some dark topics. It deals with children, which anything involving children where children are potentially at harm, it will always make me feel uncomfortable to watch. And I feel I have more of appreciation now rewatching it on this occasion. I mean, before today, I have not watched this in probably somewhere between about 5 to 10 years. I can't remember exactly how much. But I now have a nephew, and so the scenes involving the children, particularly in episode 5, I view them in a different way to how I viewed it back then. I can relate and empathize more with the parents that are in this horrific moment more than I could obviously about that. Yeah, when this aired, I was what, about 19, yeah, 18, 19, thereabouts, and yeah, you see things in a different way, and you pick up on things that are different to what you've seen before. There's other aspects of it, the governmental themes in this that I have more of an understanding and more of an appreciation for now. One thing in particular, which kind of linked to something that happened very recently in the media, relating to the times around COVID and how the government responded to that, which I'm going to get to a little bit later in the review. But before I start going into spoilers, which, like I said, 14 years, you've kind of had your warning now. This is incredibly dark, and it's hard to watch. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of this. So the Torchwood team, you have Jack, Yanto, and Gwen, and obviously we lost Owen and Tosh at the end of series 2, which for me left a massive hole in the team for this. The team, it was missing something all the way through, and ultimately, in a way, I kind of feel like the team didn't need to be there. In reality, it made a big deal about everything, but yeah, they were not really required. I mean, a lot of the focus seemed to be elsewhere, and I think in a way for positivity, because Yanto, I like Yanto as a character, but in this, I found with more time dedicated to him and his relationship with Jack, found Yanto very whiny, which I didn't really like. I'd liked his kind of arc where he'd gone from sort of being just this general T-boy and dog's body to actually kind of becoming a core component of the team. But yeah, just too whiny for me. Gwen, she's become a lot more action hero-y now. She's become less of the audience surrogate that she was when she started, and even was to a good point throughout series 2. She didn't really have that role that she used to inhabit. Jack was his usual self, and played a lot of the emotional stuff that he needed to play really well. Particularly that one particular scene in episode 5. The one in episode 4 where Yanto dies, not so much. And I should probably get this out of the way. I didn't get that emotionally invested in Yanto's death as much as I did with Owen and Tosh's. Because Yanto's was a shock, because I wasn't expecting it the first time I watched it. Toshiko's was a shock. Owen's felt inevitable by the time it came. and that was obviously because of his sort of ongoing living dead kind of situation for the back half of series 2. But it was just the emotional aspect of it. Everything kind of came together with those two, and like them two having that scene together where they're talking to each other, and obviously Toshiko being in love with Owen, and the fact that she was dying, but she didn't want to let Owen know because she was trying to help him to prepare and everything. So yeah, everything just worked there for me in this one. There was just something about it didn't quite land for me, and particularly in this rewatch today. Maybe that's because I've seen it so much that I've kind of become a little bit immune to it. But then again, when I rewatched the end of series 2 recently for my review for Torchwood, for Exit Wounds, I cried bucket loads, as I typically always will do. So yeah, I didn't feel emotionally invested in that. The one good thing for Vianto for this is the introduction to his family. His sister Rhiannon, played by Katie Wicks. I thought she was fantastic in this. It's the first thing I'd ever seen Katie Wicks, and I've seen her in a lot more stuff since then, and I think she's a really good actress. The boyfriend of hers, he was, for the most part, he was there as a bit of comic relief, a little bit, which I suppose in a way you kind of needed because of how dark this story is. But yeah, he wasn't great in that. Talking of family that come in, Jack has family that comes in this. Alice Carter is his daughter, who clearly, obviously, doesn't age. She is pretty much the same age as Jack is, or at least from physical appearances. Maybe arguably a little bit older. And he has a grandson called Stephen, who obviously Stephen doesn't know that Jack is his grandfather. He refers to him as Uncle Jack. And they have a strained relationship. My biggest issue with them is I didn't really feel, in comparison to like Rhiannon or some of the other characters I'm going to get to in a moment, I didn't feel that there was much character development and understanding for them as much as others, which does cause a major problem for me, which I will come back to. So some of the other characters that have been introduced into this, the three kind of main ones of note is John Frobisher, played by Peter Capaldi, before obviously he then later on went on to become the 12th Doctor. You have Lois Habiba, and you have Clem. Now, I'll talk about the Peter Capaldi character last, because I've probably got the most amount of him to be said. Lois Habiba, she came in as to kind of fill the hole filled by the fact that Freeman Agyeman took a job, an acting gig on Law and Order UK, for which basically she was offered more episodes. So it makes sense that she would, as an actress, choose to go with that if she gets more stuff, even though this was the character that in reality made her. Noel Clarke was also, I think, supposed to come back as Mickey Smith, but because obviously both characters weren't available, they just didn't have them in the story. They just put in this one throwaway line to explain that Martha was on her honeymoon, which obviously would later turn out to be with Mickey Smith, although we didn't know it at the time. And we brought in Lois. And Lois filled that hole that I thought was kind of missing, that she was this sort of audience surrogate. And I liked her as a character. I thought she did a good enough job. She was nervous and unsure a lot, in the same way that Gwen was in the early days. And I think that this kind of story needed someone a little bit more grounded, who doesn't kind of know what they kind of getting themselves in for. I kind of like that about the character. Now, the character of Clem was a really interesting character, because he was effectively a remnant of the initial incident featuring the aliens, which feature in this story. And as a result of that experience, he is a troubled character. He is complex. He is kind and sweet, but he is scared and unhinged and nervous and so many other different characteristics. And he's a character that you can't help but feel truly sorry for. And you're constantly rooting for him. And you're just hoping and praying that he is going to be okay and the Torchwood team may be able to help him in some way. Now, the final main character that I should really talk about is the Peter Capaldi character, John Frobisher. This is the most complex character that you have in this story. He is basically a civil servant for the government. He is a character who, on one hand, at the start, just seems quite one-dimensional and ruthless to a degree. And then you understand the difficult position that he is in because he is a middleman. And the Prime Minister says it best himself.
John Frobisher's a good man. And better than that, he's expendable.
John Frobisher represents both the average human, because he has a family, he has 2 young girls who are ones that are possessed and the aliens speak through. And there's that one particular scene in, I think it was the 2nd episode, when they're speaking late at night at home and he sees it. And he is terrified. Although he is a person that is in the know, the fact that he still doesn't know and how scared he gets, not only I think of the situation, but he's kind of scared of the children, if that makes sense. It shows just how scary the situation as a whole truly is. And that character, and watching that character, you go through the most roller coaster of emotions, leading to the culmination that you do with the character, which I'll come back to shortly. Now let's talk about the actual aliens, because they are the biggest problem, or one of the biggest problems in this story. They, like I said at the start, they have been to Earth before in 1965, and at the time they basically asked for 12 children in exchange for the cure to a new variant of effectively the Spanish flu, the one from about 1918, which killed a large proportion of the Earth's population, which the government basically thought, this is a good deal. We sacrifice 12 children who effectively won't be missed because they were picked from an orphanage, and they were given to these aliens in exchange for this cure. Now, obviously, they didn't know what was going to happen to children. They could only hope for the best and hope that they would be looked after and treated right. But no. The thing that makes the 456, the alien species in this, the thing that makes them the most evil being in the entirety of the Whoniverse, in my personal opinion, of everything that I have personally seen, more evil than the Daleks or the Cybermen or any other monster that we have ever seen, is the reason that they want these children. Because they reveal...
They create chemicals. The chemicals are good.
Good in what way?
We feel good. The chemicals are good.
They're like drugs.
They use these children for drugs. That is it. The children produce a chemical, and these aliens get high on these chemicals. So it is like, in effect, that the kids are producing heroin or cocaine or ketamine or something ridiculous like that. That's the only reason that they want these children. But the worst part of it, and we see it when they go into the tank that houses the 456, we see that the children's lifespan is exponentially increased, but it also pretty much keeps them at a stage of child. They don't grow into being an adult, because you see one of those children from 1965 hooked up to a ventilator or a face mask or whatever to allow them to breathe, because the 456, they live within a poisonous environment. So of course the kids, they would die without this oxygen mask, effectively. And you see this child, because that's what he still is, he or she, we don't know, but they're bald. They've got no hair. Their eyes are just sort of sunken into a socket. It looks like their head is maybe a bit bigger or something than it maybe should be. It just looks awful, and you can only imagine the awful life this child has lived for the last 40 odd years. But these aliens are not content with having those 12 children that were initially given as a gift. They want more.
How many?
10%. We want 10%. We want 10% of the children of this world.
They want approximately 35 million children, for the sole purpose of either using them for the drugs themselves, or for being able to sell on these drugs. And that is what is horrifying for me, because I can now picture my nephew being in that situation where he gets given up to them, and I would just... I mean, it's horrifying enough thinking of a child in that situation, but when you've got a child in your family, whether it's a child of your own, or a niece or nephew, or grandchild, or whatever, you can only amplify those feelings a millionfold. Now, in every other sense of the word, you would just expect the heroes to come in to save the day, to just go, no, this is not happening. But the government, they basically feel that they have no choice, and they have to give in to the demands of the 456, because they're effectively going to wipe out the planet if we do not hand over 10% of the Earth's population of children. And initially they do what every government would probably try and do, and they try to haggle and make a camouflageable contribution. They attempt to effectively save Faith, which ultimately backfires, and that that has a bit more significance for me now, being an adult and being a lot more aware of the wider kind of political nature of the world, because there was a scene where they're talking about, you know, using the children of refugees and asylum or failed asylum seekers as, you know, these camouflageable people, and of course it fails. The 456 will literally say on multiple occasions, no, you give us 10% or we destroy the planet, effectively. But the scene that really is the hardest to watch, I think, is that scene where in the 4th episode they are basically, at least the British government, they are debating with themselves, A, whether their own children or their own grandchildren should be part of a potential random lottery to decide which, I think it's like 325,000 children from the UK are to be given up to the aliens. And then when they've realised that, they are going to exempt the people from around the room because they want to protect themselves, as pretty much any government will ever do. They decide to go with a different way of selecting the children.
In a national emergency, a country must plan for the future and discriminate between those who are vital to continued stability and those who are not. And now that we've established that our kids are exempt, the whole principle of random selection is dead in the water
Only
anyway.
so far as...
Let me finish. Now look. On the one hand, you've got the good schools, and I don't just mean those producing graduates. I mean the pupils who will go on to staff our hospitals, our offices, our factories, the workforce of the future. We need them. Accepted, yes? So, set against that, you've got the failing schools, full of the less able, the less socially useful, those destined to spend a lifetime on benefits, occupying places on the dole queue and, frankly, the prisons. Now look, should we treat them equally? God knows we've tried and we've failed, and now the time has come to choose. And if we can't identify the lowest achieving 10% of this country's children, then what are the school league tables for?
That is so hard to watch because on one hand, you've got to say that it kind of makes sense, because anyone who has seen the bad children or the people that go out and commit knife crimes or violence, particularly when they're young, anyone who says that those people shouldn't be locked up or they don't deserve a chance or anything like that, they would be lying if they said that these children still shouldn't be given up to an alien. Every life is worth saving. But you've kind of, you know, if you are in this situation where you have to say, okay, we have to select which 10% of the children, or to use the actual term unit, that was something I really picked up on this time around. I've not really picked up on before. They do initially say children, but they very quickly correct themselves and they change the word children to units when they talk about how many units to give or where they're going to get the units from, which is a great way of showing that they're trying to effectively dehumanize the situation, if that makes sense. By calling them units, it takes the horrible image away from your mind. I think that was very cleverly done. But that whole scene where she's basically saying, you know, what are the league tables for if not for something like this? It's hard because she does actually talk a lot of sense. As horrible as it does make a lot of sense. But still, every bit with those stuff with the government, it just smacks that they are doing everything that they can to protect themselves. And I mentioned it earlier on that it kind of has a bit of relevance lately. Like, I think within the last week or two, there have been publications of messages that was passed between like Boris Johnson and other MPs and stuff in the UK around the time of the COVID pandemic. And when you think about the way that the government tried to reassure people and tried to claim that we were doing the right thing, you know, with things like the lockdowns and stuff, and then it turned, you know, you hear some of the stuff that they've been saying, it really smacks of hypocrisy. And I feel that it was so well done, these scenes in the government. And it just feels a lot more relatable now. But the government do have to appear victims. And this is where John Frobisher comes back in. And ultimately, as a middleman, he is told that his own children are going to be given up to the aliens as part of the selection, so that if anyone were to question it, they have a means of saying that the government were also victims. Which leads to the most harrowing scene in this show, where John Frobisher goes home with a gun and he shoots his 2 children and his wife and then himself to spare them from the horrors that both the children and him and his wife would have endured. Because how could you live with yourself? In reality, how could you live with yourself knowing that you have given your children up, knowing what they're going to do to them? It's something that is a decision that he couldn't have taken lightly. Now, I did read a theory that was posed by Russell T Davies. Obviously, once, you know, it was announced that Peter Capaldi was doing this role, because he had appeared in Doctor Who before. He appeared in The Fires of Pompeii as Caecilius. And his in-universe theory for why, you know, Peter Capaldi, you know, Ron Frobisher looked like Caecilius was because he was in essence a direct descendant from Caecilius. And Caecilius should have died at the end of the Fires of Pompeii. And by John Frobisher killing himself, killing his wife, killing his 2 daughters, it was the universe's way in correcting the error that was made by the 10th Doctor and Donna when they saved Caecilius and his family, and ultimately close that chapter. Which I like as a theory. I find that as an interesting theory. It's definitely a believable one. But yeah, just that whole scene was awful to watch. It really, really was. Because again, you know the horrors that they're going through. Now, the conclusion to this story. There's 2 big things I really want to talk about. Firstly, the scene right before the And I'm literally talking the moment before the actual kind of conclusion, resolution moment. Because literally at the end of that previous scene, it literally cuts straight into that bit. And it relates to music. I've said it on so many different things that I've reviewed, that music is such a crucial component of any scene, and the right musical choice can make a scene, and the wrong musical choice can break a scene. I watched this live on TV when it first aired, and I got the DVD of it the day it was released. And the 5th episode, I remember thinking, something doesn't feel right. It doesn't work. I couldn't place my finger on it until I rewatched it today, and I realised what it was. And it's that scene when Gwen and Reese and Rhiannon, they're taking these children, trying to escape with them so that the soldiers can't take them, can't give them up to the aliens. Which I will just briefly say, the scene right before that, where you've got all the dads from the council estate basically trying to stop the soldiers and trying to attack them. That was a great moment, but my big prop is the scene with Andy. You know, Andy being a police officer, yeah, and it's such a simple little thing, you know, the fact that he's so torn. He's like, do I help? Do I do my duty and try and keep the peace, whatever? And he ultimately, he takes off his policeman's jacket. He takes off his belt with his, like, his truncheon and stuff. And he basically goes to attack the soldiers in the same way that these fathers are doing, because, you know, he believes what is happening is wrong. That is just it's a very subtle little moment that I just feel really needs to be praised. But going back to the scene I was talking about, when they're trying to cut across the scale, obviously the soldiers kind of get told where they are, and it's also cut with the moment that Jack agrees to sacrifice his grandson in order to stop the aliens. And there's this whole kind of chase sequence, effectively, where the soldiers are chasing after, you know, Gwen, Reese, and the kids, and the soldiers are basically also chasing after Stephen to get him, to take him to save the thing, and in obviously both instances they're stopping parents from getting to their child. I'm going to play both versions for you now, because what I eventually learned, the DVD version that I watched was what the original choice of music was for the scene. Then after they sent the footage and everything to the production company to burn onto DVDs and stuff to then be distributed, they then quite late on decided to change their mind for what musical track they would use for that same moment, which became the one that was broadcast. Now I'm going to play both for you now. I'm going to play firstly the DVD version, and then I'm going to play for you the actual broadcast version, so you can see the exact same scene but with that different musical track, and you can tell the difference.
Reese! Quick!
Come in! Anybody else? Look out! Quick, come on! Quick, out! Quick!
Freeze. Quick.
Come in! Everybody out! Quick! Get out! Quick! Out! Everyone! Quick, come on! Quick, out!
Come on, quick, 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 quick.
Come on! Come on! Come on, quick!
So from that you can see that obviously the DVD version is a much more sort of actiony, chasey kind of scene, whereas the actual broadcast version, which in my opinion is the one that works the best, it is this sort of more somber and haunting and horrible kind of music, and it just gives something so much more pain, so much raw emotion to the scene. And I cry at the scene, the actual broadcast version. I didn't with the DVD version, and that just goes to show, like I said, you know, music can absolutely make or break a scene. Now I mentioned there that basically Jack chooses to sacrifice his son. I personally didn't like it. Not because of, you know, the fact that he sacrifices his grandson, but it's because of the fact that I don't feel we really got to know his daughter, Alice. We didn't really get to know, especially his grandson, Stephen. And so for me, the moment of the episode, and particularly the story, that should have had the most emotional impact, it failed to deliver for me. It just didn't work. And I would love to be able to say that it was good, but they needed, in reality, either to have brought those characters in, you know, into maybe like series 1 or series 2 of Torchwood, so we got to know them a little bit more, and that would have had more of an emotional impact. Or at the very least, we had spent more time with them in this series. Because without getting to know them, without the character development, it just doesn't have that same weight that I think they were going for. If I was doing this based on what they had done and what they had seen, without making any other changes, I would have made it Clem. Because Clem obviously had that connection to the 456. And you didn't really need to change anything else. You could have done it exactly the same. You could have done it that, you know, he didn't know what was happening, because Stephen didn't know what was happening. You know, he was oblivious. He was, you know, effectively an unwilling accomplice. You could have done that with Clem. And because we'd spent a lot more time with Clem, and of how sweet he was, and how much you kind of cared for him and you wanted to help him, that would have made that sacrifice so much harder. Obviously, for Jack, that wouldn't have had the emotional impact in the same way. You know, because for Jack, it was that he had to sacrifice, you know, his own grandson for, what's the phrase? The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, and that would have been true for Jack. He like I said, he wouldn't have had that kind of emotional impact in the same way, but it still would have been an emotional thing for him. You know, the fact that he's having to sacrifice things in life in order to stop these aliens. You know, I think he still would have made that choice. I think he still would have been affected by it, but he wouldn't have been as emotionally affected by his grandson. But for us as the audience, we might have had a better connection with that. So, yeah. That's the Children of Earth. I do love it. And I do sincerely believe it is arguably the best story that has come out of the Whoniverse since the revival. It's definitely top tier. Definitely the most darkest. Definitely the most evil alien, without a shadow of a doubt. And overall, you could say that it's close to perfect. There's, like I said, there's definitely flaws with it. But I just love it. I love every aspect of it. It was so carefully written. It was so carefully thought out. And I have to say, you know, one other little thing, you know, it was nice to see Nick Briggs, the voice of the Daleks and the Cybermen, actually make a on-screen appearance as a character. That was a nice little thing for him. I mean, it was a minor little character, you know, as a little government official, but yeah, that was quite. That was, you know, for anyone who's ever seen, like, you know, the behind-the-scenes stuff, and you've actually seen him do, you know, the voice of the Daleks and things. Nice to actually have him in as an on-screen role. So I'm going to round up my review there. Thank you so much from me. If you have stuck with me through to this point, according to my on-screen camera recording, it's saying I've been going for about 45 minutes with edits and with extra little footage and stuff. Definitely might be a little bit longer than that. So, like I said, if you've been with me for this amount of time, I sincerely thank you from the bottom of my heart, because I've wanted to talk about this for a long time. And yeah, I am going to talk about Miracle Day later on this month. I'm still in two minds whether I'll do that as one single video like this, or whether I'll split it up into two parts and maybe kind of focus one on each half of it. I don't know. I'll have a think about that. But let me know what your thoughts are of Children of Earth. You know, definitely drop your comments down below. Please also, again, if you've not done so already, please subscribe, turn on notifications, smash that like button. And of course, check out my other, both Doctor Who related and non-Doctor Who related content. Of course, I'm doing a lot of stuff Doctor Who related this month because it is the 60th anniversary. And that will include a reaction, well, this month and next month, to all three of the new specials. That'll be the first time I will have ever reacted to a new episode of Doctor Who, you know, when it's coming out. And it'll definitely be the first time I'll do a review of, you know, something new and fresh. I will, of course, be continuing on with my normal run of all of the Doctor Who New Who episodes. I'll be going back to Series 5 in January. I've got a couple more of the 2009 specials coming out this month. I've got rankings. I've got more reactions to some anniversary specials, to you know, some of the behind the scenes stuff, you know, loads of different stuff. So once again, thank you so much for me if you stuck with me to this point. For now, my name's Kevin. I'm a geek, and you've been watching Kevin the Geek. Goodbye.